Good afternoon here from London and good morning here in New York. Welcome to another true live scalping stream with the Mohawk Forex team. And we're here today to trade the open again and the first 30 minutes and see what we can get in that time period. We've already had a good session early on with wins in the Frankfurt Open and London Open as well today. So we're well up, and we've just been watching in the group before I came on live the PPI news in the US, which obviously was better than expected. And guess what? As usual, it goes the opposite way. Both the US-30, as you can see here, took a drop of about 20 points, and so did the SP500, about 6 or 7 pips as well. And that's good news in a way for me, because that's how usually the news works pre-market, is you'll get a good or bad result and the markets will go the opposite way, then go the way of the news on the open. Not always, but that's kind of the patterns they used to do before. Obviously the Russia Ukraine and the news about inflation and increase in interest rates and all that. It's kind of all those news events have kind of wiped out the effectiveness of the economic calendar to a certain degree. But that was again, I didn't trade this, but if I had seen that result, then I would have definitely taken sells on the 30, or if you have a small account, trading the SP500. So on a multiple chart, we're looking at DAX, even though it kind of stalls a little bit, it still moves a little bit in the US session. Got US-30, got the NAS100, and we've got SP500 trade. As you can see at the moment, they're pretty much all well synced, which is cool because you can either enter multiple trades on each of those or just pick the one that you like, look off. That's kind of the way to do it, the best way to do it. There was a potential sell a few minutes ago on US-30 as we broke our level and just got a little bit of a win down to this heavy support level, a little quick scalp. Now it's pushing back, and like I say, for the open, we're probably going to get a push up and then a push down again, probably get a nice W pattern. So we'll wait and see on that. So far today, look, entered. I mean, we've done quite a few trades already where
they are going to be attacking Democrats for. It's your prices of gasoline at the pump, the price of groceries, across the board they are seeing inflation. Now, if this was going to be the peak and it starts to...
30 trades already we've done this morning on the Frankfurt Open and London, and we've taken just two losses. Two losses came to about $25. And what I did do, I used my multiple chart there, and I did actually enter the SP500, the NAS and US-30 all the same time, all just 5 minutes after the Frankfurt Open. But again, I don't usually trade, but I kind of got this set up. I saw the move, which was all sales basically. This bear signal, and they all kind of sold off, and I got a win on all of them. So we're just a test, just to see. Dangerous because you've got to, it's nice to focus on one particular thing or two, but when you can split the screen, I've got multiple screens, but you can show it just for YouTube that you have the multiple screens set up, and it still works really well if you've got an eye, especially when things sync the same way. That's why we did so many trades. I just experimented with that, and we got wins on all those, which was quite cool. And the losses I took was the 14 on DAX and another 4 on DAX. And again, I think both of those were just not execution trade, just weren't quick enough for me executing the trade. The direction was right. So far so good. And we've taken a couple more trades on NAS and the 500. It just got $20. So small wins, just messing around, experimenting and testing, which you sometimes have to do, even on a live account. And so now we're sat waiting for the open in about 5-6 minutes times. We've got no positions open at the moment. Back to our main screen. So we're going to focus on the 500 for those of you with a smaller account. We're sat on a nice support level here now, as you can see. A decent sell-off, bear signal, no bull signal, so we know we're still on a bear market. We're up to neutral now. And like I say, No guarantee just because the news went one way, it'll go the opposite way. So we'll wait for the signal, which is our RSI kick, which so we could get a push up before push down. It could drop first, then go up, forming a nice W pattern, which is, see the Dow and the S&P are both pretty much the same shape and patterns on our 3-minute time frame, which is really nice. And we'll keep an eye on NAS as well. You can see here we'll just yeah, we're in the neutral zone. All our RSIs are in neutral zone, which is not ideal. It's always nicer when you trade in the opens and you're looking for a trigger that the RSI is in overbought or oversold territory, kind of outside the neutral zone, because it can go both ways. So as long as you know that, you can get in and out on those trades pretty quick. I'm just going to set up US-30 on that. See which way. And again, it depends how many trades you can get away, 3 or 4. I always leave myself so I can get 6 trades away maximum without getting a margin call. That's the way to do it, just in case trades go wrong, and you can load in some more trades to counteract your losing trades and then clear out once everything gets to break even. Yeah, that's skill of true scalping that you've got to learn to do. You don't just do one trade, pray you've got it right, and that you're over leverage and you're over margin and your margin called, and then you have to hit the stop loss, cancel the trade, and then you've got to go again with a smaller account or no account, so always have enough margin so you can open multiple trades to get yourself out of a hole. That is always. We'll tune into Bloomberg as well. Obviously the news is about the attack in New York, really bad. Obviously that has affected markets, especially New York. So we're going to take that into consideration as well.
The euro considers a 107, and the Japanese government this morning of various institutions began to jawbone an ever weaker yen. Dollar yen right now.
This incredible smart cloth removes any scuffs and scratches on your car and costs just $46.
125.79. Please stay with us. We continue with this special coverage. The Open. This is Bloomberg.
Yeah. Interesting to see how the markets are affected by what's happened in New York. This is probably like it's pushed markets down, to be honest with you, outside of the Russian news that the attack in the subway has really affected things. So, it could be, like I say, this economic news here is pretty much wiped out the picture. Always pay attention to them just in case, and there's no more economic news today. We're not going to be trading the IA crude oil or gas reasons, again, too volatile at the moment. But that is it today. It's really just all about scalping the open, seeing how things play out in the first half an hour or so. Moment 500 and US-30 are both on the way down. See what happens on the open. Good luck everybody, and hopefully we'll get some spikes either way. That's the way to try and get in there. Again, if you do make a mistake, don't panic, don't end the trade too early. Like I say, you usually get that nice spike where price action can go both ways before settling on a pattern. Usually the initial move is the way the market ends up going, but it could be. We're loaded up on US-30 with IC market. 30 seconds to go, so we'll get ready. We'll just watch, see what we get on here. Remember, go to the website www.mohawkforex.com if you want info on how to join our team and learn through scalping. So please give YouTube channel. Okay, let's see what we're going to get. Again, we don't have to go in straight away. If you can't see the move, don't take it. Wait that pattern. Wait for the move before you get in. You can see there's a gap, nice gap to drop down to for the heavy support. And there's a nice gap to on distance. See, it looks like it's pushing down. Sells away. Let's have a look. See if it's down. It's going to push up. 36, 37. Coming back down, 36. Good. That heavy support. Level. Down a bit more, look. S&P is doing the same, I think, at the moment as well. So it's 30. Size 36. 500. Sat on support. Need to wait. But it's gone up on 500. See, to wait and see if it hits that average line and bounces down, of course. But yeah. Right, so
What's happening in the bond space, though, yields lower, even as we get the fastest pace of price inflation for producers going back to 2010. You do see that 2-year yield, that 10-year yield going to 2.6987%, from 2.82% yesterday. And
here as well.
Dollar strengthening does persist.
Nice reversal from what we saw on the news. Listen and post this as well, so there's no panic.
At a delicate moment where we're looking at earnings reflecting both strength when you take a look at Delta and the incredible demand, and then you
Because you're going to get a direct go move motor rates right on support now, so now it's going to drop again.
Some of this uncertainty. Peter Shear has been parsing through all of this and has a fantastic view. Joining us right now, Peter Shear, of course, with macroeconomics.
Just a few minutes behind.
What's your view on how we should read this moment?
So I'm starting with equities. I think equities right now are, to me, an easier read. I expect equity indices to go back to
RSI 45 since that neutral zone.
And retest that. So I think you're going to see
on US.
in the equity market.
Nice, look at that, beautiful, beautiful spike up. We've got some buys on that. That's into the neutral zone. You're going to get a push up on here, then a drop back down again.
More, up in the air. I really actually think the 2-year
goes up higher.
4-year space,
Get in.
I think those yields can head lower. I'm a little bit more confused in the 10s to 30s.
Peter, you're great at looking across.
Yeah, look at it, push up, excellent. Getting on the sell.
Tangible currency signals of an unraveling, with euro almost hitting a 107. It's almost like a David Folkers Landau moment from Deutsche Bank with the depreciation we're seeing against the dollar. From where you sit at Academy, is the system malleable now and functional?
Nice big push up. Look at that.
Look at it with
getting on the buy.
With breakpoints.
So I think we're at this early stages of a real shift in how we have to think about Europe, how we have to think about dealing with autocratic nations, not just Russia, but also China, the Middle East. And I think that's creating this new shift where you're getting the commodity nations and
you can take the buys, and then the sells are going to come back down again, pushing down at RSI 61.
I think Europe is going to struggle. I think you're going to start seeing all these second order effects, and you don't know what it's going to be, whether it's going to be car harnesses or neon production. Europe's going to have a lot of trouble, and food's going to be a problem over the summer as well. So I think it makes sense to avoid European assets right now.
Brilliant. So we've got some buys on there. We've got about $50 on the buys. I'm going to get in on the sells in a second. And so I'm just focusing on 30. Again, you've got the same on 500. We've got a quick buy on that. Now wait for the sell. RSI just dipped. You see the RSI was there. Look, there was the curl. The SP500 was easy buy. It was easy to spot because you got the V. That was a nice one, and it was pretty similar on US-30. So all now is how to see if we're going to get the retest.
Consumers are a little bit
Cross.
they're tapped out. It's getting too expensive for them to buy, and the housing market could
So you get that W pattern, you see.
That's why I do think that the Feds.
And again, this is great because this has gone the reverse of the news. The news was good news, and it sold off, and now it's actually gone the way of the news. That's pretty good. That's spot on our analysis. And that's how we want to see the news affect the markets.
moves. JP Morgan now down substantially, at one point down more than 4%.
See if this is going to push
down
back.
about 3%. But I was just looking, that is the lowest since January 5th, 2021. For perspective, JP Morgan gained 20.
So it was nice because you got this heavy support. You see, you knew any sell was going to be tiny because you got a heavy support zone, and it kind of pushed it, and then that was it. It bounced off it like a trampoline, and that's how you got to see it. So these setups are the best ones to get, and it's the same again when it hits this breakout zone. Look, guess what? You're going to pull back. You're going to get the sell. It's going to drop back again.
Over time, where banks make a lot of their money is on transactions. And if you see that
Definitely a bullish open.
goes down, the number of new mortgages
Perfect for those.
I think that's a bigger hit. If people start
Got it. Again, you just had to follow the RSI. It was nice and simple.
So I think you could see a bit of a consumer-led slowdown, a housing-led slowdown, and that to me is much worse for bank earnings than anything to do with 210's yield curve.
Peter, a lot of people will say this is an overbeared market. People have gotten so bearish and so down in the dumps at a time when companies are still doing pretty well. How do you sort of parse through that noise, which is real, and come up with some sort of conviction about the direction?
Because remember, we had the initial direction and then the push up.
You try and sit here and read the signs and occasionally get lucky like yesterday morning. Where
This is all to collect people's stop losses. This is the good thing about it. This is what I like to see
that got you a chance to reload.
on both.
You're managing that, and it does seem
And we're at the neutral pivot point, which we know price will drop. RSI 68. Could have been on a buy again. We were on here. Look, then we grabbed $50 on that.
Which means any signal you get is lost. So I think you've got to be a little bit nimble. You're running smaller position sizes. So I'm trading this from the bearish side. And again, at the back of that, you look for long ideas. I want to be long some emerging markets, especially out in.
Whether it's a technology first, a fashion first, or a science first, whatever you hope to achieve for your business, cloud first.
South America. I love the oil and energy space. I think we are going to spend so much money not only building out sustainable energy, but reinvesting.
Stocks are down, you see, intraday the earnings. This is great market manipulation, liquidity grabbing. You know, and again, maybe to do with that, the PPI news, you know, it didn't go that in the good direction at the when it was released, and now it does. So, yeah, all you got to do is follow RSI. That was quite an easy one to follow today. So again, that's 100% win rate on these opens at the moment. I want to wait for the sells now, just see if we can get a dip on either the 500 or you can see here, look, chance. Should have gone in with two positions ideally, 3 max, and then take your profit and then wait for the reversal and then go again in the next trend. Which one, our next dip? We'll just watch this on the US-30.
You know, you bunch of Navy guys, great. I'm looking at my monthly statement and I'm
like I say, the good thing is if you get it wrong, I mean, you shouldn't have got it wrong, because if you took the sell, you know you're only going to go as far as here, right? The chance of it breaking straight off the bat, it might spike, but in terms of actually finishing the candle, it's a heavy support, which means it's off a bigger time frame, this heavy support, so it's respected. So, you know, if you did take the sell, get in, get out, and then wait for the bounce, what we did. Now we're the same on the top end of resistance. We should get a bounce or another break. Here's the key level, as you can see. Look, our blue zones come in to tell us this is get out of a trade. Here's the spike coming down. Look, the US-500 is exactly the same, or just a bit behind at the moment. Still wants to push a little higher, so we'll still wait and see.
And they're focused on steady growth. They're focused on dividends. They're looking for opportunity. They're looking for energy. So I think you're going to, again, I'm not comfortable with that.
RSI, look at that. I like to see that dip.
Both the March levels of this year, which for most coincides with May 21 levels. So I think that's where we get back. It's another, you know, around 4,200 or something on the S&P, maybe a bit lower. That's where I can get constructive again.
Bull break on NAS. Excellent. Let's have a quick look then. So on NAS. NAS is flying high again, but you're not going to jump in on this because it's sat right on resistance. This is a good indicator. You want to wait for it to break the resistance and wait for it to break above this zone here. Look, then we can get in. It just shows you the momentum. NAS is up.
we take a look at a lot of bearishness.
See here, look, everything was bullish on the open. You could have gone in on the German, on the DAX, could have gone on all of them. So there was the initial sell actually on NAS. Actually, that it was a sell on NAS, 100 pips there.
I don't know how we can parse through what is good news and bad news
Excuse me, yep.
Simultaneously, Lisa, especially when it comes to this earnings season. If we do indeed see companies able to continue to exercise price,
It was nice. It was a nice 100 pip, 200 pips sell on NAS before bouncing up. So that was a good one to get in on. Actually, that was a again on the SP. It was definitely a push up. On the US, you had a little dip before it pushed up. On the German, it literally straight up and then out. So the only difficult one was the US-30. Now everything's pushing up, so we'll just wait for reversals.
What I wanted to add value, and I know, Lisa, we've got to get to some serious issues.
Precise now backed off 63, 62.
They were a flock of seagulls like no other cover band I ever heard. The Tina Thesis was just outstanding.
Well, and there is no alternative, and they are a great band. We are looking at a market that is churn, although, as Tom was saying earlier, the dollar ascendant, and we are seeing right now a Dow, to your point, lower, but S&P actually resuming some of the gains, and Bed Bath & Beyond, to me, was really the harbinger, perhaps, of what we're going to see among the weaker companies. Tom.
Euro not to a 107 handle, but nevertheless, we're watching weak euro this morning as well. She has had a long 18 hours. Kriti Gupta, after the horror in Brooklyn, was assigned to go deeper to try to understand the geography of Brooklyn in this manhunt for Frank James. We get a briefing now. Kriti?
Yeah, well, I mean, as we covered really throughout the morning, we are still seeing suspect at large. I think the headline this morning is that this is now the suspect and now not the person of interest. And this, of course, comes after Frank James was connected.
This news is overriding.
Vehicle, the keys left at the subway platform.
This is why this positive rush up on all the indices, I think, is temporary. I think there's going to be a decline. But let's see. I mean, at the moment, look at this. We're going into. We should be buying on DAX at the moment.
Some questions about his background, but for now, that manhunt is
everything is pushing up nicely.
It is a new world. We've seen that
US-500, 30, NAS. NAS is now breaking that level. Again, on DAX, you've got a little bit of a.
We have the official news organizations, of course, a privilege.
Got 100 points you can grab on that.
A bit ago, all those people are looking at this amazing social media feed, some of it confirmed, some of it accurate, some of it not.
Yeah, NAS was a sell.
Media has caught your attention.
Everything else was a buy.
Really
now everything is a buy.
The police force is actually using social media. I'm going to pin this on actually the manhunt and the way they're actually trying to tackle this person. We know there were issues with the surveillance cameras early on, and now it looks like they're trying to and really making pleas on social media for tips, for hotlines, and that's pretty standard practice. But what isn't standard is necessarily looking at surveillance footage, not necessarily just from the subway station, from the surrounding area, but actively on social media. And I think that's really a new era in terms of finding the shooter at large.
Kriti Gupta, thank you so much. I greatly appreciate it. A conversation this morning with the mayor of New York.
Based on the briefing from my law enforcement officials and based on the evidence that we were able to accumulate, he has now been upgraded to a suspect, and we're asking all New Yorkers to assist us in his apprehension. Please do not approach him. If you see him or if you know about his, whereabouts, please notify law enforcement.
Can you tell us what you and all of your staff have learned about Mr. James in the last 6 or 7 hours?
Well, this is moving and it's extremely fluid. There's a host of evidence that we have been recovering. The NYPD, the FBI, as well.
So I hit that. You can see, look, hit that 68 level before, 69, and then backed off. He's going to same again. The continuation time break, this neutral resistance. This is the daily pivot, remember? So we scalped both the opens, London, well, all three, Frankfurt, London, and now New York successfully. Now we've got 15 minutes to go. Let's just see what we can grab
local
Wait, I
side
want to wait
about
for the
crime.
sells
You
now,
know
see if
the
we're going to get
numbers
a...
in Chicago. You don't know the numbers here. I would say that you are arguably the most qualified politician in the nation with your experience from Bushwick years ago out to where you are now to talk about this. First, on cameras, in amendments and civil liberties and all that. London is covered with cameras after terror events. Is this the tipping point where New York City,
Full
1/5
signal,
of the cameras
perfect,
of London,
spot on.
begins to monitor the public like
Here you
London?
got nice
Well, I think that I
30
have been
pips on that.
talking about this since the time I took office in January. I sent my deputy mayor of public safety across the globe to find out how are we protecting human beings throughout the entire globe. And we are not going to sit back and allow this technology to exist and not protect the people of the city. And we're going to continue to explore it.
Mayor Adams, you also had put more police forces into subway stations to protect the people of the city, given that
What
this
the news
is
is
just one
saying.
in a series of events that have unfolded over the last year during the
Wall Street
pandemic,
muted.
even in subway stations,
Station,
acts of
yeah.
violence. Clearly that failed yesterday. I know you've said you'd given yourself an incomplete on crime in the first 100 days of your campaign. Is that incomplete looking more like a failure, less like anything of semblance of a passing grade?
Well, we should be clear. We've been here before as New Yorkers. You know, I often talk about my mid-'80s when I started in the transit police,
here,
ironically. And
see
I'm
the
aware of what it takes to
producer
turn
prices, the
around
PPI,
a
which we said.
generational
Again, well above
poverty,
expectations, but the
generational
market
crisis that
dropped on
plague,
that news
in
because it
our
was
cities.
pre-market, and then
we
obviously
cannot
went
ignore
up
the
again.
proliferation of
That
guns.
might have been,
No,
it had some
NYPD,
impact on the
my
open.
administration has not failed. We have removed
That's what you've always got to be careful of.
1,800 guns.
Not just as simple as go with the way of the news, it's when the news happens is the important thing to watch out for. So, there's no more news today. And it was a good result as well. It was way more, you know, way higher than expected. 1.1 to 1.4, so that's why you had that drop and then that move. So,
on Laconia Avenue. What are we going to do about the
watching to see if we're going to get
these kids into crime
drop back
and
down
violence?
to our,
Got to zero in. It's called precision policing, not just throwing out a wide net, but having a precision approach to those who are
I tell the team it's very rare you'll get an open where it just flies in one direction and continues. There's always corrections built into it.
An important conversation, and we really
See.
need to be abundantly clear that we had a headline at that moment of the apprehension of the suspect, and that was corrected by ABC. We're sorry for that. That happens within the news flow that we have. Tom Key with Lisa Bramwitz on a very different, the open today, the sobriety of the moment in Brooklyn, and of course the national reaction to this. As I mentioned there at the end, Lisa, with Mayor Adams, I'm just as much concerned about 3 dead last night in the gun battles of New York City.
And that, I think, is the right approach to take, honestly, Tom, given the fact that it's really the surge in crime more than this one specific incident that has gotten our attention. And for all of us in New York City who've watched the change during the pandemic, where do we get back to in the new normal, Tom?
Right now, an important conversation. Jamil
We're
Jafar,
a neutral
founder, executive
resistance.
director
Kind of
of
formed
National
that W look, as you can see.
George
Second
Mason
leg.
University, I should say. But far more than that, he is
Here, look, these are the patterns I love to look for. You said a W. Our trend lines come in to help us form that in price. Just slid straight down our trend line and finally broke it, and then hit our W. Hello. Perfect.
And a gentleman that I've had the great privilege of talking to another time.
Perfect pattern.
Richard Posner, one of the giants of law.
Exactly. Looking for in a trade.
Privacy, surveillance, and law. When are we going to understand, given the carnage of these gun battles, that we are going to have to give up privacy for some form of surveillance?
500. Pretty much.
I mean, this is one of the real challenges. You know, after the 9/11 terrorist attacks in New York that killed
down
nearly
here,
3,000 people in one day, we implemented a lot of procedures and
trend line
programs to help protect the nation. And those
dropped.
programs were successful. Over the course of the last 20 years,
And
we've
then
avoided a mass casualty terrorist attack here on U.S. soil. We've had some terrorist incidents, but not a mass casualty event like the 9/11 attacks. Part of that was due in part to these significant surveillance measures we put in place, focused on foreigners located overseas and terrorists located overseas to ensure that we're protected. Now, a lot of those surveillance programs have now ended. Congress has taken action to terminate some of them. Some of them have expired over time. People have forgotten about those events or have allowed them to leave their memory. And I fear that not having those capabilities in place could make us more vulnerable to terrorist attacks. And the same is true on a much smaller scale, although a very damaging scale here. 29 people injured or affected by the smoke attacks and the shooting, 10 people shot. You know, we can see that on a smaller scale, but on a larger scale, these surveillance programs are very important to protecting our nation and have done so for the last 20 years since 9/11.
Jamil, can you give us a sense of what you think is behind the rise of crime, in particular gun violence in the United States and in the big cities most particularly?
Well, you know, we have a situation today, as you know, the economy is facing some challenges. We're seeing inflation. There is a longer trend of gun violence. People have more access, and we're not as good at enforcing our existing laws on gun access and the like. You know, we have a lot of laws in place about who can get guns and who can't get them, about illegal weapons and the like. We have to do a much better job enforcing existing laws and talk about how to get those in.
500 dots looking to break our daily support. Is it going to do it? Remember, it's got all the way to go to heavy resistance right up. It could be nice. Usually it likes to back us. These are good, nice, strong candles. Look, nice, strong candles. RSI gets 72. If it gets to 75, you want to be in again on a buy.
We saw aspects of it over
We'll
the
do that.
last 2-3 years.
See what we can grab.
That, in part, to me, is contributing part of the things we're seeing here, as well as the economic issues.
Jamil, there's a real distinction between a moment.
If not, we'll look to take the sell, like I say.
Where a lot of people saw their common livelihoods
Pull back to the
destroyed
trend line.
versus something that's stickier. And you really raise a good point that we saw a trajectory of gun violence that this adds to, not necessarily a break from the norm. How far could it go? Are we heading back to what we saw in the 70s, the 80s, and the early 90s?
Well, one hopes that we're not. Obviously, that would be a very troubling trend. We are headed in a direction that looks like that. And the question becomes, how do we arrest that trend, right? Some of that is sociological and cultural. We have to change the way that we deal with one another in this country. It's really become toxic, and we need to address that. Our leaders need to step up and address that in a very robust way. Our leaders themselves have a hard time talking to one another. What do we expect of ordinary Americans, right? And so that's number one. Number two, with respect to the gun laws that we have on the books, we need to start enforcing those laws, right? We have a tremendous number of gun laws on the books, and the president's called for more gun laws. That'll be debated in Congress, but we have a lot on the books today that are not being effectively enforced. We need to focus on enforcing those before we talk about the need for new and additional things to do in this space, in my mind.
Jamil, help me here with the polarity of America. You are one of our legal aces.
Let's see a little price action
of opinions. There's polarization, and we see that within this tragedy in Brooklyn, the shooting, crime. What are we going to do about surveillance? You know the story better than anybody listening or watching. How do we get America on the same legal page to get us away from the idiocy of thoughts and prayers?
You know, it's a real challenge. I mean, part of the problem is that I think some of this has to come from the top, right? Part of that's come from the top and our leaders. Our leaders can barely talk to one another in a civil manner. They can't get stuff done in Congress. They can't get stuff done, between the president and the Hill. We need to start.
30 really want to try and break that resistance.
We need to start working productively. As voters,
buy 71.
we have to hold our leaders accountable. That
like I say, if it does, it goes up, we'll take a buy, and then we'll wait for it to get to that 85 zone for getting on the sells to come back down again. That's when it's be overstretched. But at the moment, it's looking good for a buy.
And we've got to change that culture at the grassroots level and expect more of our leaders. And to the extent
Just
they don't bring their actions into proper behavior, let's get those people out of office and put in people who will be effective.
I hope everyone's grabbed a few buys on that. Grabbed a little sell if you did, and then the buys. Fairly straightforward again. And we're about 25% up for the day on our accounts. That's pretty good as well. Like I said, I just want to try and see if we can wait for those sales to appear.
Can the Republicans do the same
And one
thing?
direction all the way. Again, it doesn't happen very often.
Towards whatever the sense of right is, but come back to the
And
center.
our 4 chart, look at NAS. NAS was beautiful. Trading NAS. Now you should have taken the buy, and then now you should be out the trade because you're right against the blue zones.
You've seen the problem
solvers here, you're right against the blue zones.
Real impact up there. And so there are good signs, right? There are people like on the Republican side of the aisle, Mike Gallagher.
DAX was actually good. Look at DAX. DAX is fantastic. DAX is into the 75 zone. Definitely a good one to trade.
The thing is, we've got to convince our leadership and
a nice buy on the open.
That's the kind of thing we need to get America moving forward
Nice straight up.
This time of increasing inflation and economic challenges.
Do you think that it also has to do with more resources for law enforcement, or do you think that that's sufficient? It's just the actual attitude and the approach taken.
Well, you know, we have seen a walk back in resources and prioritization of law enforcement over the last few years, as we've started to talk about what law enforcement does here in Virginia, where I live. We've seen the removal of school resource officers from public schools because of a concern of what they do. But of course, that's led to some increases in school violence in those local schools. So it's a real concern. I think what we see here is the need to make sure our police are well-funded, well-resourced, and well-trained, right? We can't not account.
Everything's kind of on a neutral.
Training is important.
See, the 500's now pulling back. Hit that neutral support.
Is a terrible idea in a time of increasing crime.
We're going to bounce off and go higher. Everything else is on neutral resistance. NAS is now neutral support, so that could push higher. And the 500 NAS could push higher. The 30 and the DAX are against resistance. So watch and see. It's good to watch this. Now, I've got no positions open at the moment. We're just in a hold.
Janet Yellen speaking later this morning in the UN Security Council meeting on Ukraine. Goldman City and Morgan Stanley reporting tomorrow. And Fed Speak, of course, continues. Loretta Mester and Patrick Harker, the latest on the roster. And finally, an ECB rate decision rounding off a short week. Of course, also Tom Keene and myself will be in Washington, D.C. for the kickoff of those IMF meetings at a time when inflation very much at the forefront. And we saw that today, Tom, with respect to PPI, and yesterday with CCPI. It's one thing for the U.S. to handle it. It's another thing for nations with a much weaker currency and much more difficult financial circumstances.
Al from New Jersey emails in. Thank you, Al, for listening this morning on Bloomberg Radio. And Al says, are you flying on the same plane? That's not allowed. And no, Lisa has the Gulfstream, Al. And
all right.
You know,
you're going to complain to him.
I'm taking an Uber.
All right. Well, I will say he'll cry for you, and we all will. I will just point to what we're seeing in markets. You are seeing renewed strength after earnings that do show the dynamism that perhaps is singular in the United States when you look at some of the.
See, the earnings is what's pushing this up,
S&P
you say.
Up nearly 0.4%, 44.09. The NASDAQ up about 0.75%. We're looking at broad-based strength. What I find interesting is that even after we saw with PPI today coming in at the hottest since back at least 2010 and CPI yesterday, we're still seeing yields come in dramatically. That two-year yield, 2.3%.
So they're saying basically the PPI result did have an impact. There you go. That's why we had that push. Now we're going to be in correction zone. Look, we see we're trapped between US-30,
drawdown meditation on a day
563,
so much to focus on.
500 is now 56.
Earnings with other major banks reporting. Interesting that you're not seeing as much of a hit, even though JP Morgan shares sharply negative after reporting
at least back to our
baseline in credit loss provisions based on the uncertainty and the inflation.
We'd be looking in on the sells now. And at least we want this 100 pips, look, 10 pips. There, ready. Watch this for a few minutes of the stream. Everything, as you can see, look, great when you see it on the 3-minute time frame, all four indexes together.
When you think of cutting-edge technology at sea, you might be thinking of stuff like this. But there's an incoming revolution on the high seas that isn't quite as sexy, but could be significantly more impactful.
Container shipping is the key component of global trade. About 80 or 90% of all the world's goods are transported at sea at some point.
But there's a significant unseen cost to the modern era of global commerce.
About 3% of all the world's CO2 emissions come from shipping.
3% may not sound like a lot, but that's roughly comparable to the entire CO2 output of Germany. Since reducing trade isn't a likely option, what about a technological improvement to help reduce the emissions from these well-stocked maritime behemoths?
500 into neutral zone now. NAS is getting there. US-30 is coming. DAX is 66, still high. So again, doing exactly what we said. The initial run, another correction on all indices out. So see if we can grab anything before. We've been streaming half an hour now, so we've done about 7 trades. Sorry, 7 trades. All wins. So I'm just waiting to see if I can nip in and get any more. I think they're too crazy, because like I say, it was a bit uncertain to that how high that bar was going to go. I got in and out. Now we're looking at sales. Yep. US-30 look, it's now grey. So see.
Pepsi's Number Fever campaign in the Philippines has probably gone down in history as one of the biggest marketing disasters.
RSI is 53. See the market kind of suit. As I said. US-13C breaks this level here, then I'm going to be getting in and get some red for us. Bounced off that. It's down a little bit low. More coffee. Right. Stuff our baseline look, we see which happened at the time. We're looking at probably a double top now. Back into the neutral zone. Keep watching this. That neutral zone. 500, exactly the same. Is going to pop out red here. Does, then there's a chance of a sell. And again, you just the SP, remember, you don't need many pips. You know, get to, you know, $1 a pip, pound a pip, whichever one you want with your account size. And obviously what you're seeing there, 33 points is £33 or $33. You know, that's the way to work it out. It's a nice and easy one to work out. moving quickly. Really good at the moment. Very, very volatile. Around in that neutral zone. Deciding whether we're going to go sell or it's going to be a bounce back up. And if it does, it's only going to go as high as here again, and then we're coming back down. Break that trend line. NAS has done it. Look, NAS has hit that and bounced up. Now say DAX exactly the same. Back off it, you see, push back off the baseline. Well respected zone because you've got points of interest, support, and our baseline. Always good areas. See if we're going to, again, you know, again, if through scalping again, you could get in on this on the sell. It's going to push blue zone. Wait. You want to be taking a buy. Yeah, waiting. Chance of 100 pips. So we're going to get a little range around here now, and we should get that push down. I'm going to retest. So, but there you go. So we've been streaming 35 minutes. Like I say, we're up 25% on our account for the day. Some of the guys in the group got some nice wins as well, which is really good. We'll be back again for another true live scalping stream, and keep practicing those opens. Frankfurt, if you can get up early enough, London, and then the New York, and then look at that economic calendar. Like I say, tomorrow we have got basically retail sales, which again is pre-market, so you want to be waiting for the reversal on that. And it's all, and then we've just got the Michigan consumer sentiment, one of our favorites. Again, not traded this for a while, so we'll see how this plays out. That's 30 minutes after the open. And the main one tomorrow, as always, is the continuing jobless claims. Make sure you go on the continuing, not the initial or the 4-week average. This is the one that affects the market. And again, wait for that result and let's see what the RSI does. And this is pre New York Open. So, you know, this is all together tomorrow. It's always difficult when there's so many news releases at the same time. The main one is always the continuous jobless claims, retail sales. Yeah, you know, like they've gone up a little bit year on year, down, but on the month up. So it's really is this one we're going to be focusing on, and then the Michigan consumer sentiment. So we'll be around for that hopefully. Again, if you want any information on how to join the group and join the Mohawk team, then go to www.mohawkforex.com, and all the information is on there, all in the description in the YouTube channel below. But thank you again for another nice successful stream, and we will be back again on the next one. So until then, trade safe. Thank you for joining me, and see you on the next. Take care all.